let's talk about some trades because I came across an NBC Sports article which had the Broncos on the receiving end and the giving end of two pretty big bombshell trades, including Alvin Kamara and Jerry Jeudy. So let's get started with the Saints running back, and then we'll talk about Jerry Jeudy. So, like I said, NBC Sports put out an article with 6 blockbuster type trades that could go down this offseason. And it's my job to make sure that the Broncos are either a part or not a part of these trades and discuss whether or not it makes sense for them. And when I saw Alvin Kamara coming to Denver, I figured this would be a pretty juicy item to talk about. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the connection between Alvin Kamara and the Broncos because the bridge is Sean Payton, who drafted Kamara in the 3rd round back in 2017 out of Tennessee. He got phenomenal play out of Kamara early on in his career. There has been a dip over the last few seasons or so, but maybe a change of scenery and a reunion with his old head coach is all Kamara needs to get back on track. Now, he does turn 29 years old this upcoming July, so I don't know how much gas he has left in the tank, but I think Kamara is a very special and gifted athlete where he could probably play some really high-level football even into his early 30s. I mean, just think about last season. Who was the best running back on this team in 2022? Latavius Murray. Also came for the Saints, coincidentally, at like 32 years old. But here's what Logan Reardon from NBC Sports had to say about this. Denver Broncos, which would pair Kamara with his former head coach Sean Payton. Kamara had his best season in Payton's offenses from 2017 to 2021. While Kamara's prime years might be over, Payton has shown an affinity for bringing his former players to Denver. Will Lutz, Adam Trotman, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and Logan hit the nail on the head here, right? Sean Payton loves the old crew. He has brought a lot of Saints players either onto the roster or at least into training camp, right? Marquez Callaway came over. A handful of other former Saints players were at least a part of the Tony Jones Jr. Broncos training camp. So you definitely cannot rule out a potential trade between Denver and New Orleans. Again, they traded for Adam Trotman during the draft to get Sean Payton back with some of his old players that he loved to use so much. Now, when we look at Kamara's stats and usage over the last 4 seasons, I mean, you can see a big dip, right? For starters, the lack of availability, it hasn't been awful. I mean, he played 15 games in 2022 out of 17. But this past season, he was suspended the first 3 games of the season, missed some time beyond that as well. And he also went below 4 yards a carry for the second time in his career. And early in his career, he was such a reliable receiving threat as well, which made him such a problem for defenses to game plan. But now we're kind of seeing the receiving numbers go down. And if you're not bringing a receiving element and you're only rushing for 3.9 yards a pop, what are you bringing to the table? So Alvin Kamara's stats over the last 2 seasons, they don't look fantastic, but I still think Kamara has some gas left in the tank. Now, before we talk more about this subject, I do want to tell you guys that we are doing a bit of a month subscriber battle with our Saints channel here at Chat Sports because I was looking at the January sub numbers. We've got a week left in the month, and they've got a 9 sub lead on us. I mean, this is right there for the taking. So if you want to get Alvin Kamara, or if you want to help me take down Saints now, hit the sub button down below. Now, let's get back to talking about AK-41 coming to the Mile High City. Because stack him up against the Broncos 2023 running backs, and he definitely brings something that was sorely missing from the 2023 crew, which was touchdowns. Like, the Broncos could not figure out a way to punch the ball in at the goal line throughout the entire season. Now, I still think Kamara is, I wouldn't say a massive upgrade from Javonte Williams, if at all, because Williams, I think, had some flashes in 2023, but ultimately we saw a guy who came back really early from a knee injury that still showed some of that rust early on in his career. Now, I was also a big fan of what we saw out of highlight reel Jaleel. Samaje Perine is strictly a receiving back at this point of his career, but I think that Kamara added to that running back room would be a big boost. Now, as for what the finances look like behind a trade, if you trade for Kamara before June 1, the Saints have a $17.2 million dead cap hit. They're only saving $1.6 million. So it's not really advantageous for the New Orleans Saints to move on from Alvin Kamara before June 1. Now, if they were to trade him after June 1st, They could split that dead cap hit over 2024 and 2025. So that definitely helps a little bit. And they could also save $11.8 million. So I could see a post-June 1 trade going down potentially. Or they might just be happy to get something for him in a pre-June 1 trade and take their $1.8 million in savings and run for the hills. So with that in mind, I don't think you have to blow New Orleans out of the water with a trade offer. I think it could look something like this. The Saints get a 5th rounder, the Broncos get a 7th, right? And Alvin Kamara. We're talking a day 3 pick swap, which favors New Orleans, and the Broncos in exchange get Alvin Kamara. Now, would you do this trade? Type T for trade, type P for pass. I want to get your opinion down below in the comment section. I'm definitely open to the idea of Kamara coming to Denver. I think that we should not settle for the running back room that they had last season going into 2024. I think improvements have to be made. I'm a fan of Kamara. I don't think he's washed. But Javonte, 2 years removed from a knee injury and in a contract season, does that not just scream breakout season for Pookie? Like, I feel like Javonte Williams is scheduled for a big 2024 season. Get that knee injury firmly behind him, because as fans, I think we like to think like, oh, if they're back from the injury, that must mean they're 100%. They're on the field right now. No, that's not always the case. So I think there is a lot of truth to giving him an extra year of recovery from the knee injury he sustained in 2022. Contract season, so he knows some cheddar is on the line here, and they might be getting a lot of good results out of Javonte. But I still think adding Alvin Kamara to this running back room would not be a disservice. Now, I also need to add that Denver, they just need to improve the ground game in general. I mean, that has been a big theory and the big thesis of today's video, which is whether or not they add Alvin Kamara, I do not want to see the Broncos roll into 2023 or 2024 with the same personnel and the same makeup of that ground game, okay? Because look at their ranks across the NFL in 2023. They were 18th in rushing yards, the exact same as carry, so you didn't really get a edge, right? You weren't out-kicking your coverage in that regard. But the touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, that's tough. That's bad. That's not good. How about the lack of explosive plays on the ground? Only 9 rushes of over 20 yards, tied for 24th in the NFL. So there have to be improvements made on the ground. And if they're not going to do it with Alvin Kamara via trade, they could turn to the NFL draft, which this is not a good year to need a running back out of the draft. The best running back, in my eyes, is Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, and he tore his ACL in November. That's not very inspiring for a team to look at in April and think, let's draft the guy who just tore his ACL a few months ago. Now, one name that does jump out to me, if we're talking about getting into the end zone, well, there's one man for the job. It is Michigan's Blake Corum, who in 2023 had 26 total touchdowns. Now, Corum did suffer a knee injury the season prior, so I'm not over the moon about drafting running backs who had knee injuries in college. But for what it's worth, Nick Chubb suffered a major knee injury at Georgia, and I would say he had a very, very strong start to his NFL career with the Browns. So it's not a one-size-fit-all, but there's definitely going to be some medical concerns surrounding Corum, and that might take a hit on his draft stock, and the Broncos should definitely be looking at some RBs in the draft if they don't plan to either trade or sign a guy. Now, next up on the show, we're going to talk about the other trade that NBC Sports suggested, which was Jerry Jeudy going to the Carolina Panthers. Now, before we get into that, I do want to tell everyone about our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. Thanks to Prize Picks, I had a blast watching all the wild card and divisional round games, because with no clear horse in the race for a lot of the games, well, maybe sometimes you need an extra little nudge, an extra little push to be dialed in. And with Prize Picks, you can do that, because all you do is pick 2 to 6 players and then choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, for Super Wildcard Weekend and Divisional Round, I dragged my girlfriend to a bar, and I said, we're not going anywhere until the final game is over. And it was kind of tough to keep her engaged, but the way I did it was I just, hey, choose more or less on these projected stats, and that's going to pay for our drinks and our food tonight. So if you're trying to do the same thing with your girlfriend or someone like that, go to Prize Picks. Here are my selections for the AFC and AFC Championship game. I'm taking the more on Justin Tucker at 1.5 field goals. It's Justin Tucker, baby. I mean, he's going to make a couple, right? And then I like the more on Travis Kelce's receiving yards, 64.5. Patrick Mahomes with a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. One would be inclined to believe he might go to his superstar tight end early and often. So if you like my selections, go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. That link is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Now let's switch gears and let's talk about maybe someone going out the door, which is Jerry Jeudy, because NBC Sports in this same article listed the Carolina Panthers as a trade destination for Jeudy. Now the contract for Jeudy is very simple. He has a fifth-year option, $12.9 million fully guaranteed. So if the Broncos, who are currently over the salary cap, were to trade Jeudy away, they would also be trading all $12.9 million of that contract unless they agreed to eat some of that money, which would definitely soften the blow on the salary cap issues they are going to be facing soon. And Jeudy, as a 24-year-old wide receiver, has a long career ahead of him still. So I think there is a decent chance that Jerry Jeudy does get traded. We know that Sean Payton was pretty adamant by keeping the gang intact at the NFL trade deadline. After 6, 7, 8 games, I'm not quite sure if he still feels the same way. There were a lot of good things we saw following the trade deadline, a lot more winning than before the trade deadline. But my big question is, assuming the Broncos move on from Russell Wilson, and I don't think Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy were a good fit in terms of the way Russell Wilson likes to play and the receiver that Jerry Jeudy is. But if you bring in a Michael Penix, a J.J. McCarthy, a Bo Nix, or you roll it back with Jarrett Stidham, is it a good idea to help that new quarterback out by trading away a top-tier wide receiver on your team? That doesn't seem like a very smart idea, right? We're like, hey, we just drafted a rookie quarterback, and we're also going to trade away one of his top 2 wide receivers. I don't know how much help you're giving that rookie QB to be successful early in his career. Now, there is something to be said about maybe the Broncos just need to move on from Jeudy altogether, because over the last 4 seasons, his entire career, it has been a disappointment, I think, in a lot of ways, right? I'm sure if I told you on draft night in 2020 that Jerry Jeudy, after 4 seasons, would not get over 1,000 yards and would have 11 career touchdowns in 4 seasons, we'd all agree that's probably not what we were hoping for. So there is a little bit of truth to maybe it's just a good time to sell high on Jeudy. If you don't think you're going to be bringing him back after his 5th-year option and you want to get a good draft pick for him, now would be the time to do it. If you want to get $12.9 million off of your books, this is a good way to do it. But if you want to help a rookie QB out by keeping one of the team's top 2 receivers on this roster, then you probably shouldn't move on from Jeudy. So here's what my trade idea would look like. The Panthers are in a tough spot. They don't have a first-round pick, as we all know, and I don't think they want to move on from their second-round pick either. But the Broncos are not going to take anything less than a second for Jeudy. I don't think they're dying to trade him. So unless they get an offer they can't refuse, which pick number 33, the first overall pick in round number 2, that might be an offer Denver can't refuse. Now, the Broncos don't have a second-round pick, so now they'd be getting back into round 2, but it will cost a little bit more than just Jerry Jeudy to get pick number 33. So I think we could see a day 2 pick swap where Denver gets a second-rounder and Carolina gets Jerry Jeudy and the Broncos' third-round pick. That way it kind of softens the blow for Carolina losing their first and their second-round pick to trades before the draft even gets started. So now I want to toss this your way. Would you do this trade? Type A for accept or type D for decline. Would you do this trade? I'm definitely interested, but I got to know first, what is the plan at quarterback? Because the plan at quarterback is to take, say, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix at pick number 12. I don't think it's a very smart idea to then say, all right, now that we got a rookie QB, let's trade away one of our starting wide receivers. That one just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, I want to just share with you guys the remaining trade ideas that NBC had in this article in case you found them interesting. They had Devontae Adams leaving the division to rejoin Aaron Rodgers over with the Jets. Joey Bosa also leaving the AFC West, going to the Lions. Jerry Jeudy, like we just mentioned, going to the Panthers. Alabama wide receiver teaming up with Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. Alvin Kamara coming to Denver. And then Mac Jones going to the Rams, maybe to kickstart the post-Matthew Stafford era. Now, that's going to do it for us on today's show. I really appreciate all of you guys that tune in every single day. If you have not liked the video yet, please go ahead and do so. It really helps the channel out. We had over 700 likes a few days ago. I want to get back towards the 700 number, so hit that thumbs up button if you have not already.